A record number of Americans just raided their retirement accounts early to pay rent. Half of all renters in this country now spend more than 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their head. And here's the one that nobody can quite believe when they hear it. 44% of people earning six figures a year in 2026 just told a national survey they're living paycheck to paycheck. A record 6% of Vanguard 401k holders pulled money out early in 2025 just to keep the lights on. That's triple the pre-pandemic rate. So if you've been feeling like something is genuinely wrong, like the math of being a normal American just doesn't quite add up anymore, you are not imagining it. The middle class is not dying exactly. It's something stranger than that. There are 4 checks the American middle class used to be able to cash, and one by one over the last few years, every single one of them has been quietly canceled. The house, the retirement, the emergency fund, the second income, 4 checks, gone. Today we're going to walk through all 4 because once you see this, the last 5 years finally make sense. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you exactly what to do about it before the 5th check gets canceled too. My name is Nick, and I've spent way too much time digging into why the math of being a normal American just doesn't add up anymore, even for people who are technically doing everything right. If you've ever stared at your bank account on a Tuesday afternoon, wondered where it all went, and quietly thought to yourself, wait, I make decent money, why do I feel like this? Make sure to subscribe because today we're going to walk through exactly what happened, why almost nobody is connecting all the dots, and what you can actually do about it before the 5th check gets canceled too. It costs you nothing and it genuinely helps me keep making these. So here's the thing. On paper, the average American household has never made more money than it does right now. Median household income just hit a record $83,730 per the Census Bureau. Wages have technically outpaced inflation since 2020. Unemployment is still historically low. The S&P 500 is up 155% over the last decade. Every metric an economist would put on a slide deck looks great, and yet somewhere between 62 and 67% of Americans say they're living paycheck to paycheck. So how does the average American earn more money than ever and feel broker than ever at the exact same time? That's the question this whole video answers, and it starts with the first canceled check. Check number 1, the house. The median home in America right now costs $416,900. The median household income is $83,150. That's a price to income ratio of 5.0. In 1985, that same ratio was 3.5. So homes are now 43% more expensive relative to incomes than they were 40 years ago. And in the worst markets, it's not even funny. In San Jose, the median home costs 12.1 times the median local income. LA is 10.8, San Francisco 10.5. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies just reported that 39 of the 100 biggest metros in America now have ratios above 5.0. 5 years ago, only 15 did. So in just 5 years, the number of American cities where homes are mathematically unaffordable for the local middle class more than doubled. And here's the really nasty part. In 11 states, over 80% of households are now priced out of buying a median price new home. In New Hampshire, it's 83%. Even in Mississippi, where the median home costs $267,000, the majority of households can't afford one. Mississippi. But the cruelest twist is the lock-in effect. 80% of mortgaged homeowners in America have a rate below 6%. Over 70% have a rate below 5%. Today's mortgage rate is 6.36%. So if you already own a home, you are never selling. Why would you? Trading your 3% mortgage for a 6.4% one would basically double your monthly payment on the same exact house. So the entire housing market has just frozen in place. Existing owners refuse to move, builders can't catch up, and first-time buyers are stuck watching from the sidelines, doing the math and quietly realizing they will never own a home in the city they grew up in. And before you say, okay, just rent then, cool, let's talk about that. The median asking rent in America is now around $2,000 a month, up 33% since the start of the pandemic. The income you need to comfortably afford a typical rental is $78,722, which you may have noticed is basically the median household income. So the average American family can rent the average apartment, and that's it. There's nothing left over. 22.6 million renter households are officially cost burdened. 12 million of them spend over half their income just on rent. Half. So that's check number one. The house your parents bought with one income at age 28 is now mathematically off the table for most people earning the median wage. Doesn't matter how hard you work. The number doesn't math. Now, check number two is the one that genuinely surprised me when I dug into it, because this used to be the safest financial concept in the entire country, the retirement account. The whole deal in modern America is supposed to be that you give up a pension, you take on the risk yourself, but in exchange, you get a 401k, you contribute steadily for 40 years, and at the end, you have enough to retire on. That was the deal. In 1983, 62% of American workers had a defined benefit pension. By 2016, that was 17%. So the entire concept of retirement got privatized. Your retirement is now your problem. Cool. Except in 2025, a record 6% of Vanguard 401k participants took an early hardship withdrawal. That is triple the pre-pandemic rate. And what were they pulling the money out for? The number one reason was to avoid foreclosure or eviction. Number two was medical bills. Number three was tuition. So Americans are now actively cannibalizing the retirement they're supposed to live on in 30 years just to pay rent today. Let that one breathe for a second. We took away the pension, told everyone to manage it themselves, and the system is now so squeezed that the average person is breaking into their own retirement piggy bank just to stay housed. That's check number two. Gone. Now, if you think check number three is the easy one, I have bad news. The emergency fund, the very basic financial cushion that's supposed to absorb life's small disasters, is statistically gone. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of household economics, only 63% of American adults could cover a $400 emergency in cash. 31% of Americans, almost 1 in 3, couldn't even handle a $500 surprise. Like, the personal savings rate in this country is now 4.5%, which is roughly half the long-term historical average. So if your transmission goes, or your dog gets sick, or your tooth cracks, the math for nearly a third of the country is the same. The credit card comes out. And that brings us to the part where the gap between what people earn and what life costs has been quietly papered over with absolutely staggering amounts of debt. Total U.S. household debt just hit a record $18.8 trillion. That's up $4.6 trillion since 2020. Credit card debt alone is at a record $1.28 trillion with an average APR of 23%. Retail store cards average 30%. Some of them are over 33%. Americans paid $160 billion in credit card interest in 2024 alone. $160 billion, that's not principal, that's just pure interest, funneled directly from American families to bank shareholders. And then there are car loans, which somehow keep getting more unhinged every quarter. The average new car payment in America is now a record $772 a month. 1 in 5 new car buyers signed up for payments over $1,000 a month. And 1 in 5 took out an 84-month loan. That's a 7-year loan on a car that won't be worth half its loan balance in 4 years. So that's check number 3. The emergency fund is gone, and the gap got filled with the most expensive debt American consumers have ever carried. Now let's talk about a real household for a second, because the macro numbers stop landing after a while. Picture a couple making $110,000 between the two of them somewhere in a normal Midwest suburb. On paper, that puts them comfortably above the US median and solidly inside Pew's middle-class bracket. They're not buying lattes off a yacht. After federal and state taxes, take home is about $7,200 a month. Now, subtract a $2,400 mortgage on a modest house, $1,100 in childcare for one kid, $1,000 in groceries, $600 on the two car payments, $400 on car insurance, $300 in utilities, $300 on phones and internet, $400 in student loans, and roughly $300 a month they actually spend on the family health insurance premium. Added up, we're at $6,800. That leaves $400 a month for everything else: gas, clothes, birthday gifts, doctor visits, saving, date nights, any kid activity at all. And of course, one single car repair, one busted water heater, one dental crown, and that $400 buffer turns into a credit card balance overnight. That household on paper is doing everything right. 2 solid incomes, no Lamborghini in the driveway, no luxury vacations on Instagram, and the math even on $110,000 is still razor thin. This is what people mean when they say 6-figure earners feel broke. They're not lying, they're not bad with money. The middle class basket got that expensive. And this brings us to check number 4, which is probably the most under-discussed and the most important. The second income. The whole reason both parents work in modern America is not because it's a feminist victory, although that is part of the cultural story. The bigger reason, the one Elizabeth Warren has been screaming into the void about for over 20 years, is much simpler. In 1970, one income could buy you a middle-class life: house, car, kids, retirement, the occasional vacation. The second income, all 4 in the span of about 5 years, quietly canceled. That is what just happened to the American middle class. But here's the part I really need you to understand, because it changes how you think about all of this. The reason this happened isn't that Americans got lazier. Real wages technically did keep up with inflation. The reason is that the cost of being middle class quietly outran the cost of being a billionaire. Eggs are up 51% since 2020. Beef roasts up 74%. Family health insurance just hit $26,993 a year per KFF. Childcare averages $13,128 a year and is now more expensive than the average mortgage in 45 states. Auto insurance went up 31% in just 2 years, with Florida averaging over $4,000 a year per driver. None of those costs hit the billionaire's basket. They all hit yours. And while all that was happening, the people who already owned assets were getting absolutely showered with wealth they didn't even have to work for. The top 10% of American households now own about 93% of all stock market wealth. The top 1%, just the top 1%, just hit a record $52 trillion in net worth. The bottom 50% of Americans combined own about 1% of the stock market. So when the S&P 500 hits another record high, that's not good news for everyone. That's a wealth transfer event for the top 10% that everybody else watches from outside the casino. Same thing happened with housing. If you bought in 2015, you're 80% richer on paper, and you didn't have to do anything to earn it. If you were trying to buy your first home in 2024, you got priced out of your own life by people who already owned 3 houses. So the real defining question in America right now isn't how much you earn. It's whether you, or honestly your parents, already own assets. If yes, the last decade has been the greatest wealth-building period of your life. If no, it has been a slow-motion eviction from the middle class. That, more than anything else, is what just happened. The middle class didn't shrink, it split, which brings us finally to what you actually do about it. And look, I'm not going to pretend you can fix what 50 years of policy and asset inflation did to this economy. You can't. Nobody on YouTube can. But what you can do is change how exposed you personally are to all of it, because the people who come out of this stretch in good shape aren't the ones who make the most money. They're the ones who adjust earliest. So before anything else, before paying down debt, before investing, before any optimization, build a $1,000 starter emergency fund, just $1,000 somewhere boring and unsexy, Because the second you have it, you stop fueling the credit card spiral every time life happens. That single move pulls you out of the worst statistical bucket in this entire video. From there, attack the highest interest debt first. Retail credit cards at 30% APR are guaranteed 30% return when you pay them off. There is no investment on earth that beats that. And while we're on the subject, please don't take out an 84-month car loan. If you can't afford a car on a 48-month loan with 20% down, the car is telling you it doesn't fit your life. Listen to it. Then, once your high interest debt is under control, build the asset side of your balance sheet, because that's the side that's quietly minting the people who are pulling away. Get at least the full employer match in your 401k. That's free money. And then invest steadily and boringly in broad index funds for the next 2 or 3 decades. There is no thumbnail with a sports car attached to this strategy. It just works. And finally, do not wait for mortgage rates to crash before making any decisions. Every major forecaster expects rates above 6% through at least 2027. So either buy what you can comfortably afford on today's math, or rent without shame and aggressively invest the difference. The worst move is paralysis. Look, here's where this all lands. The middle class didn't really disappear. It split into 2 groups. People who already own assets and have been carried by a decade of asset inflation, and people who don't, who are getting slowly squeezed out by the cost of everything that used to be standard middle class life. Nobody is coming to fix that. There is no policy on the table that's going to roll back home prices to 1985 multiples or undo the 4 canceled checks. The only question left is which side of that split you end up on. And the genuinely good news, the part I want you to hold on to, is that side is still yours to choose. You don't have to make 6 figures to land on the right side of it. You just have to decide quietly and without anyone clapping for you to start building assets instead of consumption today in this economy with whatever you have. That is the entire game now. Not earning more, owning something. If this changed how you're thinking about the next year, drop a comment with the first move you're making, and I'll see you in the next one.